Okay, great. I think we can kick off. Thank you everybody for joining, and really great to see such an attendance. When you're setting up a webinar, particularly with a title like how to create an AI policy, you're not really sure if you're going to get anybody turning up. But we had we had an overwhelming response to registrations, and at the moment it just seems like more and more people are just streaming in. So thanks a lot for giving us some time on this Wednesday afternoon, particularly for those who are dialing in internationally. My name's David Nord. Darryl, would you mind just bringing up the slide pack, and then we'll go from there? So my name's David Nord. I am the CEO and one of the co-founders of an AI startup called Pathfinder.ai. And today we're going to be talking about how to create an AI policy. Now, we've heard so much talk about the importance of responsible AI regulation in the European Union and in the USA. And it's left a lot of people, particularly here in Australia, wondering what do they do next? What do they actually need to be doing? What should they be aware of? And also, should they be getting ready for something? Some people have more practical questions like, I have a customer in the USA. What do I need to do? I'm marketing to people in the USA, or I've got employees in the USA. I've seen things like executive orders. What am I liable for? We're really going to deep dive a lot of those things today. We're quickly going to just give you a bit of an intro, and then we're going to dive straight into it. So if you can go to the next slide. Thanks, Darryl. So today, we're going to give you a bit of an overview. We're going to go through global regulations at the moment, including things that happened last night. It's very hot area at the moment. It's changing every single day. We're going to talk about creating AI policies, risk-based approaches, corporate frameworks. We're also going to be going into things like ethical frameworks for AI, navigating AI compliance, and then also an open session for hopefully the last 15 minutes to just do Q&A. Great, go to the next slide. Thanks, Darryl. Just quickly, a little bit about Pathfinder. Just a bit about us. We're ex-big consulting firms, and we started this startup very recently, just really at the beginning of this year, and it's been incredibly busy. We saw that there was a huge need in the market to combine big consulting experience, so kind of that robust rigor, but combine it with startup talent and talent globally, so you can get innovative solutions without really all the bloat. You can move really fast. You can tap into it really well. So we've partnered with AI solution engineers within San Francisco. We've hired experienced designers, and also we come from running some of the largest programs in Australia and abroad as well. Next slide. Thanks, Darryl. As I mentioned here, this is our core leadership team here. We've got people like Luis and Miriam in San Francisco. We've got Venkat in India. We've got Darryl here. We've got Lindsay and Laura and many others supporting us locally here as well. We've partnered incredibly well with OpenAI, AWS, Google, and Azure. And so we're very well connected and still very much AI agnostic, making sure that we get the right solution for you. And next slide. And there's 6 ways that we're partnering with customers at the moment, ranging from the top left, board education, C-suite education training sessions. We run that quite regularly. Find where AI will make the biggest impact in your business. We have a process which we use AI with to understand where AI will make a huge impact. The fun starts beginning for us when we start doing experiments, so running very targeted experiments. We then build and deploy AI solutions for companies as well, particularly for those that don't intend to ever have their own AI engineers. Enable and support your people. This is ranging as simple as how to use ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot through to really understanding how this is going to change your job in the future. And finally, one of the reasons why we got into this is we can take all the AI burden off your company's shoulders. We can be your end-to-end AI engine, and we're all AI geeks, and that's why we got into this. Next slide. Thanks, Darryl. And that's a bit about me. My background is very much kind of startup, and then big consulting firm through an acquisition, now back into the world of startup. And really looking forward to hearing what resonates today. But that's enough about me and Pathfinder. You're all here today to learn about the exciting topic of how to write an AI policy. So I'm very proud and honored to have Dr. Darryl Carlton as part of our team, as our AI policy and compliance advisor. He is literally writing the book on this. And I'll hand it over to you, Darryl.
Thank you very much. Hi, folks. what I want to go through today is something that, for me, I've never seen this. I'm approaching my 50th year in IT, and I don't recall so much attention from policy and government and legislation on any technology that came out. We didn't have the FBI issuing rules about how to use a SQL database. We do now on AI. So we're going to go through a lot of how policy will impact what you do, how you apply policy, what are the things you need to think about, what the different governments are doing. Now, we've got a QR code here. If you follow this link at some point, either now, we're going to have it up again at the end. It's a fairly quick assessment of your readiness to adopt AI in a responsible way. Now, we'll keep coming back to this word responsible. It dominates the discussions in the literature and the legislation, is about the responsible deployment of AI. Okay, breaking news. This came out overnight. The Five Eyes security, which is USA, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, UK, which includes the NSA, FBI, Australian Signals Directorate. They have come out overnight with a policy on the responsible deployment of AI, and the sort of things that they're talking about, we already had planned to discuss with you today. And it just struck us very briefly this morning that the legislation and the attitude of governments around the world towards AI is all around control and management. And we're going to discuss what control looks like in the world of AI. So you can see the points here. AI systems are valuable targets for malicious cyber attack actors. There's a segue, there's a connection between the regulations on AI and the regulations on cybersecurity, data privacy, and we'll discuss some of those as we go through as well. So from a global point of view, there is only one set of legislation that has currently been enacted, and that is the European Union's AI Act. The rest of the world, while they're moving towards legislation, currently has policy in place, and it's please apply. It would be nice if you followed these things. And a lot of them are reasonably consistent with each other. There is a standout, of course, which is China, but the others are reasonably consistent. So the EU Act has compliance with ethical principles. The ethical principles are laid down in the Act. They're also consistent with the ethical principles that are laid down in the IEEE guidelines on ethical deployment of AI, OECD, the Australian government, Canadian government, etc. One of the key measures is human oversight, and I'm going to give you some amusing examples of that later, and legal liability with respect to AI that perhaps doesn't work the way it should. So some of the frameworks that are in place today, the Bletchley Declaration. Personally, I think it's fantastic that they went to Bletchley and 29 governments signed this. Of course, Bletchley was the home of Alan Turing, and when he cracked the Enigma code, and the Turing test is a key metric of whether a system achieves its presentation as being artificially intelligent. The OECD ethical frameworks, there have been several orders out of the President and Vice President and Office of Management and Budget in the USA. Australia's AI ethics principles have been published by the Department of Industry, Science and Resources. At the moment, it's a voluntary framework, but the government is very much moving towards implementation of legislation around AI. Canada, Japan, Singapore also moving towards legislation around AI. Cybersecurity, forms a very significant risk connected with AI. And a leading law firm in Asia and Australia and Asia said directors and officers should be seeking to take reasonable steps to respond to and reduce that risk in order to avoid breaching their duty of care. And this is a key thing that we're going to be discussing today. AI policy is not exclusively for technologists. It's not about how the technology teams execute AI. There is a role of senior executives and policymakers in the execution of AI. And what we have seen is that where company directors and senior executives have failed to follow governance and oversight, they have been held personally liable for breaches. ASIC has taken various organizations to court over cybersecurity breaches and have stated very clearly, from the perspective of corporate governance, establishing effective oversight is a function of managing risk. And these policies are about establishing effective oversight. With the ASIC took Centro Property Group to court, and the federal court ruled that directors must make themselves informed. They cannot rely on outside advisors and managers. They need to know what's going on in their organizations. Another court case that was taken by ASIC was against RI Advice, who were the victims of a cybersecurity attack. And the court found that the senior executives of RI Advice were liable because they had not put in place effective governance and oversight. They didn't have proper policy in place. So establishing policy is about ensuring that governance and oversight is in place to protect senior executives and board directors against personal liability. So we have all of these ethical principles, and most of the global approaches to ethical frameworks are built on the idea of responsibility. The Bletchley Declaration, Australia's AI Ethics, OECD, the White House, etc. And I'm going to go through what those look like. Now, what we have done is we have distilled all of the global approaches into 8 frameworks. The first ethical policy in place is human, societal and environmental well-being. AI systems should benefit individuals, society, and the environment. AI systems should respect human rights, diversity, and the autonomy of individuals. AI systems should be inclusive and accessible and not involve or result in unfair discrimination against individuals, communities, or groups. AI systems should respect and uphold privacy rights and data protection and ensure data security. And that's where there's very much a connection to cybersecurity, personally identifiable information, GDPR. AI systems should operate reliably and for their intended purpose. People can understand when they are significantly impacted by AI and determine when an AI system is engaging with them. So there needs to be transparency and explainability with respect to the AI. People need to be able to contest the results of AI. There should be a timely process to allow people to challenge the use or outcomes of those systems, and there needs to be accountability. Now, those are a broad set of ethical principles, and they generally encompass all of the global approaches. What I want to spend time on is what we might call use cases, applying these principles in actual use. The general approach by most jurisdictions is to have what's called a risk-based approach. So identifying the risks that are involved in the AI systems and managing the risk. So some systems, particularly under the EU legislation, are prohibited. AI systems that engage in subliminal manipulation, AI systems that exploit vulnerabilities, that have real-time biometric surveillance. Now, a problematic one on a global basis is social scoring by authorities, banned as a prohibited system under the European system. But of course, in some jurisdictions, social scoring is approved practice, in fact, encouraged practice. So that one's going to be interesting to see how it maps out. High-risk systems. Now, most AI systems that you guys are going to deploy are going to fall into the category of high risk. Biometric identification, where AI is used to identify people through their unique physical features in real time or after the fact. These are considered AI. And under the legislation, under the guidelines in Australia and other countries, if you implement a system that is considered high risk, you are going to need to meet certain governance and oversight criteria. And we're going to help you with that. AI systems help manage essential services like traffic, water, gas, heating, so critical infrastructure management. And this could also involve embedded AI. These are considered AI, high risk, and you're going to need to have governance for those. Where the AI system decides who gets into schools or training programs, or if the AI system does an automated assessment of student performance, these are considered a high-risk category. Where AI is used to hire, promote, or fire employees, assign tasks and evaluate their performance. And in fact, I found today the Spanish Supreme Court just issued a fine against a company that had breached their obligations with an employment system. And they had been seen to be, the AI system they deployed was prejudiced against certain classes of people. So these are the sorts of things that governments are getting involved in. They're using these frameworks to govern and control how we deploy AI. The final category is low risk and embedded systems. And the difference with low risk and embedded systems to high risk system is generally they don't engage with personally identifiable data. Now, you will know this when you're using things like ChatGPT or Claude. There's nothing, when you're just integrating with or interfacing with ChatGPT, you're not usually putting in any information that identifies who you are. You'll be asking it questions, you'll be soliciting information, you might be getting it to rewrite documents for you or to read documents and summarize them, but you're not putting in any personally identifiable data. And the same is true with many embedded systems. So low risk and embedded, the difference is if it doesn't have any data that identifies individuals, those would not fall under the same category as the high risk systems, where you're going to be expected to put in place fairly high degrees of governance and oversight and documentation. Now, some examples of what's going on. So Vice President Harris in the US has said that agencies must show their AI tools aren't harming people's safety or rights. And you saw how that is reflected previously in the principles. And one of the examples that she used was if the AI system identifies you while you're queuing at an airport to go through security check-in and you get called out, you must be able to go back into the same place in the queue so that you're not disenfranchised from the wait period. I thought that was pretty funny. Adam Schiff with the Office of Management and Budget has put forward this policy that is safe, secure. AI systems must be safe, secure, and trustworthy. And these are applying the principles of fairness, reliability, and safety. AI systems must do no harm. And we can see here that governments are actively engaging to say, we are going to monitor this. We are going to make sure that your systems do no harm. And so we're seeing the application of these ethical frameworks and policy coming out to make sure that as we deploy AI systems, we align with these ethical frameworks. And another ethical practice is whose data is that? Now, the data is going to be when we're training a large language model or when we're using an AI system, perhaps in an HR environment or a sales environment. And it was quite interesting. Recently, the chief technology officer of OpenAI, Mira Murati, was asked on a Wall Street Journal interview, where was the data that you used to create, to train OpenAI, to train ChatGPT? And she gave a very vague answer. And she gave a vague answer 3 times in a row. And she basically said it was publicly available, publicly available. She didn't say that they had the rights to use it. Now that's becoming a problem. And the US has introduced a bill to say that they will require prior notice to the Register of Copyrights when releasing a new generative AI system trained on copyrighted material. We are all going to have to know where our data comes from, how we source that data to train the model, not just in use. And 200 artists are actively calling for protection against the predatory use of AI. So there's a big movement right now, both from the creators of content and government, to say what data you use is important, where you get that data is important, and you have to have the rights to use that data. AI in practice is quite interesting. We're seeing some very amusing outcomes. Now, this is an academic paper published last month, and nothing fabulous about that, except when you look at the first sentence, certainly here is a possible introduction for your topic. It's taken straight out of ChatGPT. They didn't even edit it. So they generated this academic article without the author, the authors, and there are 4 authors on this, going back and cleaning it up and putting their own context in it. So ethical AI, one of the frameworks, if you remember back to the 8 principles, one of the principles was there needs to be human intervention. Now, this was also the case in Canada, where a lawyer went to ChatGPT and used ChatGPT to generate the submissions to the court, and ChatGPT faked legal cases. I actually don't blame the AI as a problem here. The issue is that the human that created these content didn't go back and check it before deploying it. And an ethical AI principle, one of the 8 frameworks, is humans in the mix. You have to get involved and check and make sure it's reasonable. The New York State Bar Association this month has put out rules on how lawyers are to use AI. And what it essentially says is not having human oversight, not providing supervision, may constitute unauthorized practice of law. If you're allowing the AI system to make all the decisions for you, it's not a qualified lawyer. And so this comes down to the principle of accountability. People responsible for the different phases of the AI system lifecycle should be identifiable and accountable for the outcomes of the AI system, and human oversight of the AI system should be enabled. Now, a very, very distressing case in the United Kingdom is the UK Post Office Horizon project. Between 1999 and 2015, over 900 postmasters were prosecuted. 236 went to prison. It turns out that the Horizon computer system, look, it wasn't an AI system, but it illustrates the point. The Horizon computer system produced inaccurate financial reports, and these were the sole evidence that led to prosecutions. An investigation of the system found there was no testing and validation. They dismissed user reports of problems. There was a lack of transparency and accountability. And these are all some of the policies that are coming out of ethical behaviors of AI deployment. The systems must have transparency and explainability. Now, when I did my first AI degree, 1983, there was a technique there called backward chaining, where you would explain how the answer came about. And we're essentially saying the same thing needs to be applied here. You need to be able to backward chain. How do we arrive at that decision? The systems have to be contestable. When the AI system impacts a person, community, or group, there should be a process to allow people to challenge the outcome. Now, this is going to be really important in things like providing credit, doing medical allocations, providing admission into schools, getting jobs. Can I contest the system, or is somebody going to turn around and tell me, no, the IT system said this, or the AI system has banned you? There has to be contestability, and there has to be accountability for the system at the human level. Now, ethical AI in practice. What comes about here is, just because we can do something, should we do it? William Clifford was a mathematician and philosopher in England. And in 1877, he gave a presentation to the Royal Society. And he upended centuries of common thought. And the story goes that Clifford put forward, a ship owner, his ship arrives back to London, they unload it, and he realizes that the ship is damaged, it's worn out. Instead of repairing the ship at that point, he says, well, I think it's probably going to be okay. I'm going to send it off to America with another load. So he loads the ship up, he fills it up with crew, he fills it up with passengers, and he sends the damaged ship off for another trip. The ship arrives safely in America. Does that make Clifford's decision ethical? Second scenario, the ship does not arrive in America, it sinks, all lives are lost. So the principle that used to exist before Clifford gave his speech was the ends justify the means. If it got there safe, it meant it was an ethical decision. If it sunk along the way, no, it didn't. What Clifford did was upend that thinking to say, what you knew beforehand is important. What you knew first determines the ethical framework, not what happens as a result. And we can contrast this with the Cambridge Analytica and the Facebook problem. There was an ethical duty of testing and evidence-based deployment, which was not achieved. There was no questioning of the assumptions and interrogating the values being implemented in what they did at the time. So with AI, the argument under an ethical framework is you need to make yourself aware of the potential outcomes and the risks that might occur as you go through the deployment of the system, and make decisions based on how your data could be used, how your system might be used. It's not going to be acceptable to say, we didn't think it could happen like that, or we didn't know it would be used in that way. So, ethical frameworks in practice. You need to develop use cases for AI in your organization. The frameworks themselves, the principles themselves are fairly straightforward. We have distilled 8 principles from all of the international literature. Those won't change. What will change is how you apply those principles to the AI solutions that you're deploying in your business. So the use cases. So you need to develop use cases for AI in your organization. You need to look beyond, can we do this, and consider, should we do this? Apply those 8 principles and create living documents for governance and oversight. The legislative cases, the litigation taken by ASIC and others against corporations for failure in cybersecurity were a failure to implement appropriate governance and oversight. So as we move forward with AI, we are going to have appropriate governance in place. We're going to have to monitor the use and impact of AI systems, and we're going to have to question the systems. Garbage in, garbage out. Is the wrong result coming out? We don't want a repeat of the UK Horizon project. All right, folks, getting towards the end. My new book is coming out. It'll be available for pre-purchase on Monday on Amazon, and we cover all of these principles. And we also have in the book how you go about producing a conformance assessment that would meet the European Union AI Act. The Australian government has said that it will be applying international standards on conformance to the deployment of AI in Australia. So that should give you some guidance for that. As I mentioned earlier, this is the survey. If you complete this survey, it's very quick. I think there's only 10 questions, and it'll give you a very simple metric of your readiness for the deployment of AI. And it's drawn from all of our research into AI principles and ethics. So please have a go at that.
Thanks a lot, Darryl. I hope you guys found that really informative. So what was interesting to me there is how few people dropped off. we barely had anybody drop off the whole time, which is great. And I've also gotten a few text messages, one being Darryl should be a national treasure. So very, very well done there, Darryl. So we still got plenty of time, everyone. It's obviously a very dense topic. But there's a couple of things that I'd like to use the rest of the time with. First, really encourage you, if you haven't, just click that link and at least start the assessment process. It's 10 questions, and it's just going to prompt you some things that you should be thinking about. What we will be releasing very soon is a much more thorough conformance assessment that is essentially I would say, a very expensive consulting engagement that you just basically click through and get very clear instructions, which will be available on our website. What we can do now, though, is we can open it up for questions. So you can either raise your hand or just pop it in the Q&A, and we'll answer them there. So
I was to say there is one from Daniel in the Q&A.
So there's one from Daniel. How do these policies relate to the responsible AI framework used by Google? Is that something you've looked into, Darryl?
The responsible AI framework from Google is a little bit of a moving feast at the moment. We have a challenge when we talk about American standards. America doesn't have standards. And there is issues from a cybersecurity point of view with something called the US Cloud Act. And that has concerns for anybody outside of America for where your data is held. It provides access by US law enforcement to your data anywhere in the world. The Google policy aligns reasonably well with, from what I've seen, with IEEE and OECD. So it would fit into the framework that we've produced. The problem in America at the moment is there's no legislative framework consistent across the entire country. We have two jurisdictions have introduced frameworks, California and Maryland. The President of America has announced an intention to create legislation in this space. And given this is an election year, it's unclear whether that will be able to happen before the election occurs or not. So there is no federal legislation or federal guidance across all jurisdictions, which is a challenge when it comes to organizations like Google.
We've got another one in the chat there, Darryl. Another question coming in from Darryl.
I can't see them. I can't see them. Where are they?
I'll read it out to you. What's a good place to start putting an AI policy in place? Is there an Australian framework that can be used?
Yes, so there is the Australian framework, comes from the 8 principles that I outlined as well. So in the principles that we have published and are in my book, the headings for those were drawn from the Australian principles. And I did that deliberately because I live and work in Australia. And what I've done is to merge under the Australian principles all of the international standards. So those principles will work for you. And even if you follow the Australian principles, but you use our framework, you will also comply with EU standards. Now, that becomes important if you're deploying your solution into other jurisdictions apart from Australia.
Great. Are there any other questions? You can also just reach out to us on LinkedIn or send us an email as well, just to hello@pathfinder.ai, and we'll be able to respond as well. Just before we close, I want to, sorry, I was off camera there, guys. I'm just quickly going to do just a poll. I'd love to get just your thoughts. Like, this is the first time we've run an AI policy session like this. If you thought it was really valuable, we actually want to run them monthly. It changes so often. So please let us know if you'd recommend it to one of your colleagues. But what's even more important to us is, what would you like to see next time? So just the more you can give us in there, the more it'll help us to tailor these appropriately next time. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Can see plenty of people answering there. Thanks. It really, really helps us. Well, that's been really helpful, everyone. Thanks, Darryl, for holding our attention for that and also making it so accessible. And yeah, really looking forward to hosting a lot of these in the future. We're hosting a few more of these types of webinars in the next coming days. So tomorrow there's one for associations and not-for-profits that I'll be running. And next week, we're hosting the first in a repeated series of practical AI for leaders. If you're wanting to understand how to get going and have a more targeted conversation on tactical things that you can do within your organization to get a win, basically within the first 2 or 3 months of attending that session. Also, thank you for all the comments that have come through saying it was a great session. Thanks a lot. As I'm sure you can imagine, holding people's attention when talking about things like AI ethics is incredibly difficult. So it's great to see the content showed. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Have a great week, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.